Why does getting to the airport have to be such a dilemma? The driving, parking, finagling a ride. Well, if you take Uber, it doesn't. It's easy. Just install the Uber app. Enter your destination, confirm your location, and within minutes, a car will pick you up. Whether you're catching the red eye or taking off at the crack of dawn, you can request a ride 24/7. So avoid the hassle. Install the Uber app now and take your first ride today. Uber, the better way to get there.
Running down the bridge, not really having any clue what was throwing rocks in our vicinity, good-sized rocks, and I stopped long enough to get a 357 out of my backpack and looked back, and that's when I saw it. I saw
Good Sunday evening, Monster X Radio listeners. This is Gunnar Monson, host of Monster X Radio. I am also the founder of the Sasquatch Coffee Company. Sasquatch Coffee, have you tried it yet? Go to www.squatchcoffee.com to get yours today. With me today, Shane Corson, our good friend, is on his way back from Southern California. I know that next weekend he'll be with me and some other of our friends, including Derek Randall, Larry Turner, I believe Cindy, and Jared Goodell are going to be up there. At the Olympic Project is having an outing, so we're going to, he is on his way back from San Diego, so I hope you drive safely and have safe travels, Shane and Summer. And with me today is our special co-host, Julie Rench. Julie, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys?
I'm doing well. I heard you were we talked earlier, and you were under the weather a little bit. You starting to feel a little bit better?
Yeah, I was about 10 days worth of a cold that I couldn't shake, so starting to feel better now. So
good to hear.
Thank goodness.
I wanted to share a little bit about an event that's coming up, a brand new event down in San Francisco called Bigfoot Bonanza. It's March 10th, 11th, and 12th this year, and they've got a good lineup. Of course, Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot is going to be speaking. Tom Yamarone is going to be down there, Kathy Strain, our good friend Seth Breedlove, and Craig Flippy. Craig Flippy is from Portland, Oregon. Good friends with Cliff. In fact, he did Bigfoot Road Trip with Cliff, and I got to know Craig a little bit from Guy Edwards' Hopsquatch event. Craig was a regular attendee, but Craig will be down there. He's an independent filmmaker, and he made he has a project called Crappy Little Dreams. You can go online and Google it, and he is a crack up. So they got a good lineup going, and again, that's the Bigfoot Bonanza. You can find it on, just Google it. It's March 10th, 11th, and 12th. And one of the sponsors is Sasquatch Coffee. So to support our ongoing events for Sasquatch research and get-togethers, with us today is our very special guest, Thomas Steenburg. Julie, are you excited to talk to Thomas today?
I am stoked.
I had the pleasure of going out with Thomas as part of Operation Sea Monkey this last year, and got to know him. I had never really spent. I'd met him before at Todd Neese's Beachfoot event, but really hadn't spent any time with him. And we got to spend some time in close quarters for several days, and I got to know Thomas pretty well. And he is a good guy and wealth of knowledge. He's been doing Bigfoot research since the 70s. So without further ado, let's bring our guest speaker. Well, if I can get it to work. Here we go.
Hello,
Thomas,
how are you?
welcome to Monster X Radio.
Hey,
Hey,
guys.
Thomas.
We have unmuted you.
You got to forgive me. I am fighting the flu, so if I break out in coughing every now and then, it's unavoidable.
All right. Well, thanks for bucking up and joining us today on Monster X Radio. How are things up in your neck of the woods?
Cold.
Cold. It's been when I say cold, we're talking about the 20s and 30s. I know it gets a little colder in other places. It just seems really cold here when when we see frost, we think it's really cold.
Yeah, well, up here in the West Coast in British Columbia, we usually have mild winters, but for the last 2 months, we've been getting hit with what the rest of Canada goes through every year. It's been cold. I mean, I actually seen kids playing hockey games outside in frozen rinks around here, and I haven't seen that in 8 years.
That kind of weather, like I said, it's cold up and down the West Coast this year, more so than usual. This week we're looking at today's the last day I think we're going to have where we have cold weather, and then they said we get 3 days of pouring down rain and possible flooding. So it's been a crazy weather winter. Doesn't keep people, the hardy Bigfooters from getting out and doing. Of course, Shane's been out in San Diego. He and Adam Davis went out last weekend, and I think it was in the 60s or low 70s. So
they were doing research in Diego?
Well, there's surprisingly some wooded areas around there, but they did not run into anything squatchy down there. So, Thomas, for anyone who might not know who you are, which you've been around, like I say, for quite some time, you are familiar with all the cast and characters from the been around forever. John Green and Peter Byrne and Renata Hinden and Grover Krantz and all those characters. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this crazy field of Bigfoot research.
Well, I'm now considered one of the old guys. I never imagined I'd ever hear myself being called that, but yeah, I've been around since the mid to late 1970s anyway, and I like I said, when I started, there was no internet or anything like that. All we basically knew is what was written in books by what you would call the pioneers in this field, the late John Green, the late Rene Hinden, the late Grover Krantz, the late Robert Titmuss. All these gentlemen I knew and did research with for many years, had my series of arguments with them all and disagreements, and at times had some great adventures and a lot of fun. And really took a hard, serious look at the possibility of whether or not there is a higher primate in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Canada. And to me, well, I got started. I think when I was on your show last year, I went and told you the whole tale about how my parents got a digest book, and it talked about things like dinosaurs, and it had chapters on hurricanes and tornadoes, and for some reason in the middle of the dinosaur chapter there was a little 2-page article with these blurry black and white photographs of something titled "The Thing in Loch Ness," and for some reason that just clipped a switch in my young suggestive mind, and I must have read that thing 100 times. And when I went out to try and find more information on it, I started reading about this thing in Western Canada called the Sasquatch. In the Western United States, they called it Bigfoot. And I realized in a very young age I was never, ever going to move to Scotland. So I started concentrating on the Sasquatch. But I think what really did it, and I think I told you guys this before, but I came down one weeknight when I should have been asleep in bed on a school night, and my parents were in the darkened living room watching a movie on the old black and white TV, and what they were watching, first my mother didn't want me to watch it because she was afraid I'd have nightmares, and my father said, no, let the lad watch this. He's interested in this sort of thing. And so he won the argument, and I'm sure he's regretted that ever since. They were watching that old Hammer horror film starring Peter Cushing called The Abominable Snowmen of the Himalayas. And from that moment, it was Sasquatch. And it's been Sasquatch ever since.
And so you as a young man, you got or young boy, you got you got hooked. And what got you into serious research? I mean, a lot of people have seen, the classic movies.
Schools and everything. I drove my teachers crazy with it, asking questions. And time we had a choice in science class or whatever to do a project or a presentation on something, I'd do something on the Sasquatch. They wanted me to do something on something logical, like the extinction of dinosaurs or the length of the ice age or something like that. No, I want to do something on Sasquatch. So I do it, and I usually do such a good job, they'd have me present it to the other classes and things like that.
Wow.
So I realized I was born in northern Ontario, in an area in Bancroft, Ontario, and all the time I lived in Ontario, which has just as much wilderness as British Columbia, I'd never heard of a single incident there. As far as I knew, the Sasquatch was a West Coast phenomena at the time. So when I had the chance after high school, and there was never any money or anything to go beyond high school, I decided to list in the Canadian Army, and I wanted to get posted to the 3rd Battalion of the PPCLI, which at that time was stationed near Esquimalt in Vancouver Island. But the closest I could get was the 1st Battalion, which was in Calgary, Alberta, which was just on the east slope of the Rocky Mountains. So that's as close as I got. So after going through battle school and a year of getting yelled at by ugly sergeants and having my kit torn apart and marching so up my feet were going to fall off, blowing things up, I actually got posted to Calgary, and I took one look at the Rocky Mountains, and I said, no one's ever built a wall between eastern BC and western Alberta. If they've been seen in eastern BC, they've got to be seen here too. So I took an ad out in the local southern Alberta press that simply said, Sasquatch. Anyone who believes they've had a sighting of this creature, contact Thomas Steenburg and the phone number. And I didn't expect much result, but man, my phone was ringing off the hook. And it was while in Calgary I contacted and met the late Dr. Vladimir Markotic, if you recall that name. He used to do a lot of work with the late Grover Krantz on this subject, and they put a book together called Sasquatch and Other Unknown Hominids. And I met Vladimir in his office at the University of Calgary, and he kind of took me under his wing. I did the field stuff while he did the academic stuff on this subject, and we were kind of like unofficial partners while I was still in Alberta until he died in the mid-1990s. But that's basically how I really got going.
Okay. Now, do you still actively take reports and go to the site and do investigations?
Oh, absolutely. I've never stopped doing that. The most recent one I got, this is 2 years old, but I just heard about the other day, was actually forwarded to me by Cliff Brackman, who someone contacted from Eastern BC to tell about a sighting he and his family allegedly had in the BC side of the Rocky Mountains 2 years ago. I've been trying to contact him. The most recent one in this area that I'm aware of is just not too far from the Agassiz-Harrison Hot Springs area. Okay. But, the reports continue to come in. Some years are busy, some years are not so busy. It tends to vary quite considerably.
Okay, now is there any specific season that you receive the most reports in as a pattern, or is that varied also?
One of the first things I've noticed after, I don't know how long I've been in this now, 38, 37 years, there is no patterns. Every time we think we have a pattern, something goes out of the water. To me, patterns, there are none. You could get a sighting now as well as any time of the year as far as I'm concerned. But to me, according to my stats, which contradicts most other people's stats, the best time to see a Sasquatch would be in the high summer months. But that could be just simply the reason there are more people active in backwoods areas in the high summer months. And people who are active in the winter are usually making a lot of noise. They're snowmobiling or quadding, or they're making a lot of racket, so everything around knows they're there. So in my opinion, set patterns, there are none. Never assume anything. You could see a Sasquatch anytime, any time of the year, any time of the day or night. That's not helpful.
Have you received any reports? Yeah. Have you received any reports of any sightings that are like very close to a city or a town before?
Oh yes. So we've had a number just in the outskirts here. I mean, I can walk to the closest one to my door. It's just down the road here by Hatzick Lake. Yeah, we get reports all around here. You drive in British Columbia. You as soon as you leave the cities or the towns and you're in wilderness, you're in Sasquatch country. There may be long periods of time where nobody sees anything, then all of a sudden for a period of a week or several days, several people come forward and they will stop almost as soon as they had started, almost as though a creature was around, hung around for a bit, went about its business, and then moved on. And that kind of scenario repeats itself over and over and over again.
Well, see, a lot of people think that these things would only be found in very remote regions where, it's like mountainous or, the Pacific Northwest, for example. For many years, people thought that was the only place that they would be found. But, where I'm at, not far from me, 20 minutes from me, is where that gentleman has one that comes on his property every once in a while. He allegedly has seen it 3 times. So, to me, I'm like, well, that's very possible given the rural area that he's in. It's just a lot of people still don't understand that, I don't think. And they may have seen or heard something that could have possibly been related to, something unusual, and they may not even realize it because they don't, attribute it to that.
In my opinion, the Sasquatch is a creature, and this is, of course, assuming that the animal does indeed exist.
Right.
In my opinion, the Sasquatch is a creature of the deep wilderness areas. Now, you look at my map, my pin maps and everything here in my study, you'll see almost every pin is along a roadside, a riverbank, a lake shore. In other words, where there are people to see them, and let alone people to report them. Yet there's vast areas of green on this map that don't have a single pin in it. But that's not because there's no Sasquatch there. That's because there's no one there to see it, let alone report it.
Right. It takes two things to have a Sasquatch sighting. It takes a Sasquatch and a people.
Yes,
right.
Sightings occur more often than not when they come near people rather than the other way around.
True that.
Yeah. See, one wanders through someone's backyard who happens to be living out in the outskirts of town, and his property backs onto a forest reserve or whatever. I mean, or it crosses the road late at night with only a few homes on it. There's even been cases of them walking right into towns and usually disappear before anyone has any position to do anything about it. But that's not surprising. We get people in downtown Vancouver waking up in the morning to find black bears marauding through their garbage or mountain lions in their back porch. They're wondering what happened to the dog, and they see that a wolverine took it during the night or something like that on the security camera. I mean, that kind of thing happens all the time. The Sasquatch is no different than anything else. When they come near people, that's when most often sightings occur. Yeah.
Now,
right, and when we happen to be out in areas where they frequent. I mean, that's the other scenario. They either come. It's not easy to make a Sasquatch sighting happen. It just happens. It's a chance thing.
The majority of the population are not going out to try to see a Sasquatch. But the vast majority of the sighting reports are by people who had no intention of trying to see a Sasquatch. They're just people going on about their business, and they just happen to be at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending upon how you look at it, when they encounter one. And they just see the unbelievable for a few moments before it disappears, and they're usually left standing there with a rather babbling look on their face, wondering what the hell that was they just saw. And then in most, especially still here in Canada, they'll tell one or two friends about it or family members. They're told they're crazy, so they decide to keep quiet about it.
Right.
And it's been the same scenario since the beginning of the mystery, when the word Sasquatch was first coined in the 1920s. In the United States.
Go ahead, Gunnar. Oh, okay. Well, I know that most of the sightings are actually reported while people are in a car driving.
Oh, yes. Well, you ask your average person, your average big town dweller or city dweller, has he ever seen a deer? He'll probably say yes. You ask him what were the circumstances of the sighting of the deer. 9 times out of 10, he saw it on the roadside or crossing a road while he was driving in his car. Right? So it's just the simple fact that when you're driving on lonely highways, going through wilderness areas, the odds are greatly increased that you're going to be at the right place at the right time to encounter something like this. More likely than you are sitting in your apartment building in downtown Manhattan.
Right. Well, that depends on who you ask. I know some people that claim they have them living in their bathroom and floating across their ceilings, and
there are a lot of people, a lot of stories. I mean, one of the biggest problems with this field of research today, and I've said this before, is it's become an asylum that's been taken over by the inmates in a lot of cases. I mean, there are people who claim to encounter Sasquatch 3 days of the week, communicate with them, talk to them, but it always comes down to, you got to take my word for it because I can't give you anything else.
Right.
Yeah, and on the unfortunate side effect with things like television shows like Finding Bigfoot, and believe me, there are shows out there now that make Finding Bigfoot look like Smithsonian special.
Right.
it has become trendy in the U.S. to say you saw Bigfoot, and that is causing a lot of problems.
So it certainly ups the bar for researchers who field reports. I mean, you have to be way more vigilant about vetting reports that are submitted, because, like you say, I mean, it's a two-sided coin to me. Is that it's raised awareness of the subject, and that's both, like you say, it's both good and bad. There's a lot more opportunity for fake reports and hoaxing to go on, and as well, on the other side, it also kind of opened the door for people that have had encounters and never really felt comfortable telling anybody about it, but because it's kind of become more mainstream, it's allowed some encounters that never had been shared before to come out of the woodwork. Have you experienced that side of the coin too?
Oh, yes. I mean, like you said, the internet and everything, it's been a great tool in some ways, and it's been a pain in the butt in others. But
a lot of I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great tool for someone who's actually had an encounter of some kind to try to communicate with somebody to try and report it. On the other hand, it's also the best tool in the world for every snake oil salesman and the yarn spinner out there. I mean, all you have to do is do a little bit of homework, and you can come up with a completely convincing fake report nowadays and sound completely convincing. Fortunately, the trend is for people who make up such stories, they still tend to suffer from the same affliction they always have. They tend to go overboard.
Mhm.
It's like they forgot they went way past the stop switch sign when they should have stopped before. They might have gotten away with it, but they keep going.
Right.
Make it a little bit more fantastic, a little more unbelievable. And finally, the red flag goes up, and you realize this guy's blowing it out both ends. Because there's only three possibilities in this. The Sasquatch exists, so that means some people have actually seen it. The Sasquatch doesn't exist, therefore everybody who reports one is either mistaken or they're lying. They're the only three choices we have. And I'm sure you've realized, and most of your audience have realized this now, that I'm definitely in the zoological camp. I do not associate Sasquatch with UFOs, interdimensional shape-shifting, giving out love vibes to the top of mountains to Kalani or anything like that. I'm not in any of those camps. To me, that's all a lot of nonsense. So, if the Sasquatch it exists, it's a flesh and blood primate, and it's been here, it always has been here, and it's still thriving.
Totally agree with that. Well, now listen, I have a question, Thomas, for you from the chat room. Somebody was wanting to know, do you investigate or have you had any reports from the Kaloops, Salmon Arm, or Revelstoke areas of BC?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All three, or? All
three.
Wow. And when was the latest?
Most recent one was a couple of years ago near Salmon Arm. A truck driver reported he almost hit one when he was driving east with a 18-wheeler. He thought some crazy tall guy in a fur coat had crossed the road in front of him, and then he realized he's wearing a skin-tight fur suit. He was able to watch the thing before it disappeared off the trees on the right-hand side. That was just a couple of years ago. Yeah, I'd have to look back at my files to give you details. But, yeah, in all those areas there have been encounters, and, yes, and there have been reports, and, yes, I've looked into a number of them in all those areas.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. Now, how far will you go for a report? I mean, how far have you gone as far as travel time?
Oh, well, when I had a lot more money, my income, and I was living in Calgary, it was nothing for me to pack up and head to the West Coast 2 or 3 times a year. I went down to California quite often, Oregon, Washington. I went up to Alaska, the Yukon. When I was younger and a lot more gung-ho, if someone reported a Sasquatch in Bella Coola, I'd pack up the Land Rover and I'd drive 12 hours almost, not only stopping for gas until I got there, just to hear that, it actually happened 2 weeks ago, or, it's probably something else, or, that kind of thing. That didn't bother me. Today, I'm more of a homebody. I kind of stick to my general area here, which is the lower mainland of British Columbia, in and around the Harrison Lake area. And if I hear about something on Vancouver Island, I'll contact a colleague who's closer and let them look into it, or someone in Washington and Oregon or California, and they'll do the same thing for me when they hear something up here. Like what I just told you about, I just got a report that was sent to Cliff Brackman about something seen in eastern BC. So I'll try and contact this gentleman on the phone to see what he has to say about it, because it is a 2-year-old report. I'm not going to pack up and race all the way out there, because the odds are 2 years, there's no indication at the spot where it was seen that it was ever there. But 20 years ago, I probably would have done that.
Well, that happens when you as you age.
You get milder as you get older.
Right.
More skeptical, too.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to have that to,
A healthy dose
to
of
investigate something.
Is the best tribute a researcher can have.
Mm-hmm.
A healthy dose of skepticism, I'll repeat that, is the best thing a researcher can have, because it's the ones you can't find another explanation for that will keep you intrigued.
Right. That's true. There's you got to run them through the filter, and the best right now that we get is that it falls into the interesting file, because short of a body, we're not proving it. There's lots of fuzzy photos and orange.
Mm-hmm.
Orange is the new black circle on Facebook of pictures. Where people, if you have to circle it, it's probably not going to prove Bigfoot exists.
Oh no! Put it this way: any video footage or photograph where someone is telling you what you're looking at, as evidence, it's already gone out the window.
Right. Exactly.
All right. I mean, if it's open to interpretation as evidence, it is useless. If someone has there's the Sasquatch, and you go, where? Oh, that circle there, and an arrow pointing at it. That blobby thing there? And you're like, yeah. Well, right then and there, that's, as evidence, that's nothing. Even if it was a Sasquatch, as evidence, it is useless.
Well, have you ever seen any photos or videos of a Sasquatch yourself, Thomas? Clear ones that you are like, oh wow, there it is. Has anyone privately ever showed you?
Are you saying other than the PG film of October 20, 1967?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been shown a few photographs and stuff that I find are interesting, because I know the individuals who took them, and I tend to believe that they're not lying to me. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a very interesting photo that was taken a couple of years ago at the north end of Harrison Lake that I only got to see once, and it's hard to find this gentleman because he lives up there in a remote area, and I've been trying to get a hold of him ever since. He showed me a photograph of a subject he took, and it was fascinating. It was a good, clear picture of either an excellent costume or a real Sasquatch, one or the other. And knowing the gentleman's circumstances, I'm not sure. I know for a fact that he did not have the ability to Photoshop something like this, or did he have the money to produce such a costume? But he sort of like disappeared now, and I've still been trying to get a hold of him. A fellow who runs a little business, an American fellow who comes up here every summer named Bill Miller, who's a colleague and researcher in the Harrison Hot Springs, took a photograph in 2004 that for most people would look at and say, well, there could be other explanations for that, and would have a very valid point in saying so. But I know the man who took it, and I know the circumstances under which he took it, and I know he's not lying to me. So if his story checks out, that's probably definitely a Sasquatch he took a picture of.
Well, it's
it all comes
I always
down.
say that all evidence requires context. So
correct.
That it's helpful if you can. Besides just seeing a photograph, and that's one of the problems with Facebook or with the internet, is people are posting up, photos and saying there's a Bigfoot in this picture and there's no context, there's no before and after picture, there's no, what if you took a single picture, where's any other pictures of the area, it's and have someone that you know personally and can vouch for their
right.
motive.
You've got to look into these things. There were 2 videos shot here in the missionary British Columbia a couple years ago that have been all over YouTube and the internet, passed off as actual footage of Sasquatch. So I went and looked into it. One was, it looks like a Sasquatch acting like a nonchalant black bear in Yellowstone Park while a whole busload of Japanese tourists are taking a half a dozen pictures of it.
Well, I've seen that. That's not real.
That was a hoax. And not only did I look into it, but I also know who did it. I also know who they went through to get the costume and what type of costume they use, because the town of Harrison Hot Springs uses a similar costume every year in their Sasquatch Day celebrations. So that was a hoax. And there's another video of that was taken at Hoover Lake, just north of here, that same year, that is purported to shoot a Sasquatch, that I think was a case of mistaken identity, but it's passed off. You've seen it. Thinker Thunker thinks it's a real Sasquatch. A lot of people do. But I found out by going to the area and looking at the aerial photographs of the area what lake it was actually shot at. It was called Hoover Lake, which is just north of the Mission dump. And I found out that the name of the man that they actually filmed. So it was not an attempted hoax. It was a case of mistaken identity because the camera was very far from the subject when they shot the picture. If they were able to get it any clearer, any closer, you would have seen was a man carrying a backpack. I know who the man was. I know his name, Brandon Pollock. And he was out there fishing with a buddy, and he was on that little island outcropping in the lake looking for firewood, and that's what he was doing when these people up high on the hillside on the road videotaped them jumping off a rock and doing this and doing that, and they thought they had shots of a Sasquatch instead of it's a very tall, skinny guy named Brandon Pollock. Who was, if they just built another 20 minutes, they would have seen him get back in a rowboat, which was out of film sight at the time, and seen him row back across the lake. Or they did that on purpose. In this case, not a case of mistaken identity. But the point is, you look into these things, you can find other explanations for it. And that's what real investigation ought to be. You look into it, you dig, and you find, and if you find other explanations, well, that's good too. Just because the end result is not what you hoped doesn't make it any less solved.
Exactly.
Well, the conversation we had was a particular audio recording that the people didn't understand. It was unusual, and eventually it was found to be coyotes. Is that correct? And people are up in arms about it. It's like, no, that's big.
That one.
And then even when it was confirmed that with a visual of the coyotes making this audio, this vocalization, somebody saw them doing it, and people still, people become emotionally attached to the results or to their interpretation.
That's another problem with this field of research. There are still a few people who I have not heard from since the day of the Chehalis Sounds, who I'm sure were quite upset with me when I announced that. And I never hear from them anymore. But then again, I never hear from them on anything anymore. They may have just taken the wind out of their sails. I don't know, because there were a lot of people who use these particular type of cries in their call blasting expeditions. And I had the feeling they were just getting other coyotes calling back, and they never realized it.
Yeah, that's
didn't want to hear it. I said, I don't know why they get. You find an explanation, it doesn't make it any less solved. Take those recordings off the list and go on to the other ones that we still have no explanation for. But you see, there are too many people in this field. This goes back to the asylum being run by the inmates argument.
Absolutely.
Who are not really researchers. They're more like religious or or cult leaders trying to push a faith rather than a researcher trying to find an answer to a question.
Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they're totally convinced, and their big job is to try and convince everybody else. But if you're a real researcher, you have to face the possibility that in the end, you could turn out to be wrong. It is still possible that the Sasquatch and everything about the Sasquatch is just a great piece of Western Canadian mythology and folklore, or North American mythology and folklore if you include the United States and Bigfoot in all of this. It could turn out to be that way. That doesn't make it any less more valuable to look into and research and study, but you have to accept the possibility that's what it may turn out to be in the end. I don't believe that. I still think the animal is real, but I'm willing to be convinced I'm wrong if the evidence eventually convinces me of that.
Right,
but a lot of
thing
people
is that none of us have proven it.
They're like the Roman Catholic Church. They'll bury it in the vaults of the church and hope no one ever sees it.
The point is, we have not. None of us. No one who calls themselves a Bigfoot researcher has come forth with conclusive evidence that proves that this animal exists. So until everything is up in the air, until that is done. I mean, I've had I spent a lot of time in the woods, and I've heard a lot of weird things, and we've processed. We've collected copious amounts of audio stuff, and look at it through sonic visualizer, and we put some. There's things that we have recorded that don't match up with any known animal. So, but. And I've had some weird stuff happen. I think was a rock thrown in our direction, but I didn't see how the rock got from point A to B, and so you'll never hear me say that Bigfoot did this until I see Bigfoot, and do one of these things or make a vocalization. And there's a lot of
good. That kind
people
of
that speak in definitive terms.
That kind of attitude makes you a good researcher, because that's what you need to have. If you're willing to, Bigfoot had to have done it because there's no other explanation. How many times have I heard people say, well, there was nobody else within miles around of me? Well, how the hell do you know that? Were you monitoring every hiking trail and Forest Service road that came into that area that day? How do you know there were no people around? Well, I mean, that's crazy. No one's ever been there. No one has ever been there. How do you know that? You're there.
Right. It's always funny. It's always surprising to me when I'm out somewhere and I think I'm really remote, and then I find a beer can. I'm like, okay, there's somebody's been here at some point. Humans are not very good at not leaving sign that they've been in an area.
I mean, I took a lot of heat I have a blog site. Which I did a few video presentations on certain subjects of this research, and I did one on shelters and nests. Oh yeah. And there's no evidence ever been found that Sasquatch has anything to do with this stuff. This is just another one of those tales that through time and retelling over and over and over again, it's taken on a life of its own, and it never should have. And people are sending me these mails. Well, what explanation do you have for this one? I mean, we found no signs. There was one old boot around, but we found no signs of people. So a Sasquatch did you find any evidence of Sasquatch? Well, no. Well, what did you find? You found evidence of people, the boot. There. That's pretty good proof that there were some people around there at some time in the past.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, no, it's just a total. I don't know. Some people in this field, common sense goes by the wayside because they want something to happen so badly.
I think that's true. There is a lot of that. Is people are emotionally invested in the result. They think that they believe that you start out with the premise that I believe Sasquatch exists, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to bring back proof, and people. I think that happens. People,
go out looking for Bigfoot, and they do it enough that they get frustrated when they don't find anything that they could, and like I said, I found impression that looked like foots in the woods, but didn't see Bigfoot do it. Didn't I think that these animals exist, and I think that I agree with you that they're biological entities. That it's an animal. We're dealing with an animal. How intelligent an animal? It seems to be a really intelligent animal, smarter than a deer, probably. Smarter than other known animals in the woods. But I watched a movie last night that featured a Kodiak bear in it from back in the 90s called The Edge with Anthony Hopkins in it, and this bear tracked them. And to me, in the movie, the bear showed a lot of intelligence. It's surprising, but we're talking about something that is a primate that probably is smarter than any other animal in the woods, and we're talking about an animal that probably has the lowest population of any animal in the woods. So it's not surprising that it's not more prevalently,
That movie called The Edge, and it was filmed in around Banff, Alberta, which is an area that I spent a lot of time in when I was on the Alberta side of the Rocky Mountains looking for Sasquatch evidence. That was a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, it was good. Susan insisted that I watch it, and it was worth the watch. So I noticed and was thinking of you when I saw where that it was in Banff was one of the areas that it was filmed in. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about your relationship with the late John Green. I know you were very. Go ahead.
John Green was the late John Green, who passed away last May. When I did your show a year ago, he was still alive but was not doing very well. He was my teacher, my mentor, and one of my best friends. He and the late Rennie DeHinden were the two guys, and the late Vladimir Markotic, who really, really got me going and inspired me in this. I met John in 1979. I mean, he could have just slammed the door in my face. I was going around, nosing around, sticking my nose into things in the late 70s, and I called him, and I showed up at his door. He could have just dismissed me as another one of these got here and will be probably never hear from him again after the weekend types that he probably dealt with a million times. He could have slammed the door in my face, but he didn't. He invited me into his home, and he showed me his Alberta, because I was in Alberta at the time, and he was fascinated. He really wanted to have a contact on the east side of the Rocky Mountains, and that's how I became good friends with John Green, because anything I heard about in eastern BC and western Alberta, I'd send the details to him, and he'd put it up on his in his file system. And if he heard something in my neighborhood, he'd make sure I'd hear about it so we could go and look into the matter. But John, I spent a lot of time with John Green, and when he started failing after his late wife June died a number of years before him, it really took a lot of wind out of his sails, and he started to fade rather quickly after June was gone. We have been expecting it for a long time, but it's still a shock when it happens.
Right.
Especially since before he passed, I was just talking to him on the phone a couple of nights before. I had gone and visited him about 3 weeks before. And John, it was sad to see. He would be sharp as a tack, and 1 minute, and then the next minute he couldn't remember anything. So getting old is a terrible thing. And all I could say about John Green is he every step of the way he did it with the utmost dignity, pride, and I'll miss him, and I will. I miss him. That's about all I have to say about that.
Yeah, well, he's I mean, it's interesting because you guys are kind of the same mindset that he was a very pragmatic about his approach to the research and to the subject.
Right. Yeah, but John, he was a great collector and accumulator of data. And when he was able to go look at something, he'd do it. But he was mainly an accumulator of data. Rennie was the one that in the early years that really went out and tried to look at the things in detail. And he and John were almost partners when they began, and they had a falling out. I mean, one of the most amazing things about my early years in this is I was able to be friends and do research with all these guys, Green, DeHinden, Titmus, Krantz, and I never got sucked into their personal conflicts because half the time you couldn't get them in the same room together.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And unlike others, they never held it against me, and I still really don't know why. Because there were other people, if Rennie heard that he was visiting John Green or he heard he was visiting Titmus, Rennie would have nothing to do with him, and vice versa. But me, I just get the third degree. So what does that Titmus say about this or that? And I say, I'm not telling you.
No,
I'm not telling you. As simple as that. I won't tell them what you say either. So I guess they took me on my word.
I think you just probably nailed it as to why that you were able to maintain friendships and working relationships because you didn't badmouth one to the other, and I think that'd be a good lesson for current Bigfooting is you have something that it kind of goes back to if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all.
No, I do it twice, and I actually Rennie for all his biases and faults, he sure loved a good debate. And when he found someone who was willing to argue with him or something, that didn't raise his ire. That got you his respect. I mean, I'd sit there. I remember sitting there at night with Renee, and we'd argue into the night about things. He'd be getting hot-tempered, but after the debate was over, everything was fine. No problem. Sometimes I even got him to thinking twice about a few things. But what was going through his mind. But when it came to subjects like Green and stuff, if I thought Green was right and DeHinden was wrong, I'd tell him. I think you're wrong about this, Renee. He goes, what do you mean? And well,
no, I like we're going to get into Operation Sea Monkey here in a second, but one of the funny things about being on that trip was you do the best Renee DeHinden and Todd Neese does a great Peter Byrne. I still remember Todd calling me up on. I get this message and it's Peter. This is Peter Byrne, Mr. Monson. This is Peter Byrne, and then after about a minute, Todd says, "Oh no, this is Todd." Like you bastard. But yeah, you got so. It was a little bit like going back in time on Operation Sea Monkey because there was Thomas Steenburg, and then we had Renee DeHinden, and then we had Todd Neese and Peter Byrne were both on. And so it was a crowded boat.
We had Tom Yamarone around. We would have had Bob Gimlin there too. I've never heard a better impression of Bob. And John Green, well, just ask Bill Miller. He can do John Green like you'd swear he was standing right beside him. Okay. It looks like the spook.
Good stuff.
Oh, you gotta forgive me. A train's going by, and I keep coughing all the time.
Oh, that's all right. Let me get one more question in here from the chat room before we get onto the Operation Sea Monkey. I have a person wanting to know, Thomas, what your opinion is of the Freeman footage.
Which one?
They didn't say which one, but I'm thinking probably the one where he's down by the water edge and he's looking at the footprints and then he goes up. Yeah, there it is, that one.
I'm going to say this bluntly and to the point. I knew Paul Freeman. He was a hell of a nice guy. Take a shirt off his back for you. And I defended Paul Freeman a lot longer than I should have. I believe Paul Freeman gained prominence in this field in 1980-81 when he was working as a watershed ranger in Washington State there in the Blue Mountains when he had his first alleged Sasquatch encounter. I thought, and I was totally convinced that Paul Freeman was telling me the truth. I fell for it. But Rennie kept telling me, go talk to Auden, talk to this guy, you'll find out things. And I did. I researched. I studied. I learned. I went with the facts. And I have to say now, Paul Freeman, in my opinion, was a prime example of what I politely refer to as Ivan Marks syndrome.
What do you mean by that?
Somebody who may have had an encounter at one time and was the center of attention, and when that attention dies down, this individual feels that the attention is more important than the subject itself. So they do what they can to remain the center of attention.
Well, and some people refer to currently. Go ahead.
In answer to your question about the Freeman footage, and I assume it's the one where he goes, "Oh, there he goes."
Yeah, there he goes now. What a coincidence.
That one. In my opinion, that is a attempted hoax on Freeman's part. I think the figure in the film is remarkably similar to Freeman's son Dwayne in size and scope, and I think it's the same costume they both tried to pass off as in a series of still photos taken a number of years before, which is probably Dwayne or Paul in the same costume. I mean, this is like about the third or fourth time Freeman came forward with alleged footage of Sasquatch. And quite frankly, it got to the point where, like I said, a hell of a nice guy. I could talk to him for hours, and I did. And it got to the point, the last time I saw Paul Freeman before he died in 2001 was down in Seattle in a coffee shop. I walked up and he said, "You're not going to grill me again, are you, Thomas?" I said, "You bet I am." He said, "Oh, darn." and I did. Like I said, Paul Freeman was a hell of a nice guy. He may have had a true track finding at one point or another, but the vast majority of the stuff he produced over the years, in my opinion, was a result of what I refer to as Ivan Marks syndrome, Paul Freeman trying to keep himself in the limelight and the center of attention.
Well,
some
I
people
can believe that because that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
in my opinion.
I mean,
answer to the fellow who asked the question is referring to the "there he goes" footage. I think that is a hoax.
So
okay.
I mean, you could say the person that been mentioned in that same kind of context is that probably
that's
had
what I was
some
thinking about.
Everything
activity
and come out with is a hoax. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was some. He may have had some Bigfoot stuff happen to him, but the stuff, there's some stuff that's pretty obviously not.
Right.
But it's interesting. Yeah.
What's the difference between Todd Standing and so many other hoaxes is Todd Standing has money to burn and spend on his hoaxing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to do a better job of it. I mean, when someone comes out with these amazing stories over and over and over again, it doesn't take much long for the red flags to go off and the common sense switch to hit. I mean, you just listen to the circumstances around Todd Standing's encounters. They're unbelievable. I crawled 5 miles up along a creek with this whole wall until the land. I mean, come on. Come on. Give me a break.
No, that
okay.
But
okay, Mr.
There's
JTF.
There's some people that think that some of the early thing that he had something happen that he tried to that was then later embellished for the same reason, for keeping attention.
I've seen paperwork that shows that Todd Standing in the early part of just the late 90s and just after the year 2000 was trying to get financing for a movie project he was interested in called Salvanic, which was supposed to be the usual schlock horror film. A bunch of teenagers with girls with big breasts getting killed by something in the woods.
Movie.
And just got caught up. He was renting theaters in the Edmonton area and stuff. John Green's family went and checked out one of his presentations. They said he was charging $30 for people to come in and see these flippets of 3-second clips of something moving in the trees. You know, it was.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. So no, in my opinion. And Todd Standing was basically the area he was concentrating on is an area where I spent 20 years doing research in the area of Pierre Lougheed Park in Kananaskis country of Alberta. And I got to tell you, there's no place there called Salvanic. It doesn't exist. And there's no hidden valley through a hole in the mountain anymore with dinosaurs and things from the past in it.
Well, some people still believe Standing.
Well, people will believe anything. There are people. I could start a religion tomorrow with the worshiping of bowling balls. I probably have 30 people signed within a few months. You know, there are a lot of naive people who want to believe anything, and they will. I mean, if I come out with a carcass of a Sasquatch tomorrow and laid it out on the CBC News and Fox News, you can't go with MSNBC because they're kind of biased and left wing. And I laid it out for the whole world to see. There will still be people out there who's saying it's got to be fake because there is no Bigfoot.
Right, confirmation bias.
There are still people out there who are so religious they will not accept the fact that the dinosaurs once existed.
Right.
As far as they're concerned, that's just a big conspiracy to downplay organized religion. I mean, you'll never have 100% support by everybody on anything. That's just the way it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, let's talk a little bit about you. You were a participant in Operation Sea Monkey, as was I. And let's talk a little bit about your experience with the project that Todd Neese put together, along with Thomas Seawood and yourself and Ron Moorhead and I. And Victoria.
I'm Will Victoria.
Yes. So
that was the great expedition.
Go ahead.
That was a great expedition. It was I believe over 5 days long, in amongst the islands in the archipelago between Vancouver Island and the mainland of British Columbia, which has a long, long history of Sasquatch and Sasquatch sightings going back to long before the white man ever showed up on this part of the continent. Tom Seaward was the perfect guide for that because he's, well, I always call him the Koala, but it's Clock-Clocky-Walk is the proper name or something like that. He kept correcting us all the time. He's a member of the Clock-Clocky-Walk First Nation. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I had to do it a million times, and he knew he was a gold mine of knowledge of the local of history of sightings in that particular area, kind of like myself around here in the Harrison area. He knew everything. He also knew some stuff that I think were rather, kind of far out there, but that's all part of First Nation oral history and tradition. But he was the perfect guide for such an expedition, and going to these remote islands, which people rarely visit, at a time when the Sasquatch is reported seen down eating clams and sailfish in the salmon runs, I mean, I thought it was a great opportunity to try and find something. And if we had more time, I think maybe after a while we might have actually come across something. Unfortunately, no, what I would call convincing evidence was found on the expedition to Sasquatch, other than that second night out when we found possible footprints near where Tom had an old cabin that was rotting away, and there was indications that something had moved through the grass there. But other than that, Sasquatch evidence-wise, other than a lot of interesting stories from people, we really didn't find anything. Yeah, but that wasn't from lack of trying.
Right.
I mean, we counted almost everything else you can imagine: black bears, deer. We saw wolves, grizzly bears. Just not the animal we were looking for.
Yeah, and that. But I mean, I didn't go expecting to come back with conclusive evidence of Bigfoot. I mean, or Sasquatch, because it is Canadian. I will defer to the Canadians' designation. But,
thank you.
Yeah, but I would. I mean, it was a great opportunity to go and check out. And like you said, Thomas Steenburg is who we're going to have on the show here coming up. Wealth of information, lots of stories, some personal encounters, and he took us to a couple of different areas where he actually lived on one of the islands for I don't even know, like 20 years or something. And
matter of fact, we were outside the ruins of his family home there on one of the abandoned village islands there.
Yeah, village island. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was an area where he grew up, and was there a lot of bear scat on those trails.
And and it was an interesting
a totem that had fallen and was slowly being reclaimed by the natural elements. Yeah, it was a fascinating area. The only difference I would say, I would have preferred if we had spent more time in certain areas rather than going from beach to beach, island to island to island. I would have liked to have spent maybe a day or two ashore on some of these areas, having a look around.
Right.
You know,
and I think
maybe
this was
number
kind of
of islands
research
in half spent more time in some of the more promising areas and spent more time looking there. But other than that, I thought it was fine. I would have changed the name. I would have called it Expedition Coast Primate or something like that, not Operation Sea Monkey.
But I do tell Todd that was an unfortunate name for the outing, because
tell him to use the term expedition
it was a little
rather than operation.
It sounded a little bit too tongue-in-cheek, given that it was meant to be a serious endeavor. And so what was the most, like you said, tell us about because I actually was not on the excursion to the island when you went with Victoria and Todd and I think Ron and you guys had some weird found the most compelling.
I don't know. There was something just in the atmosphere. It was our second night out. Remember the first night we spent sculling the shores in the Zodiacs with the night vision and the FLIRs and the sound amplification devices, and basically the biggest sound we heard was a barred owl. But the second night out, that's when we saw the first black bear, remember, in the mist before it got dark.
Right.
And we had gone ashore to place Todd's ground sensor he has, which is sort of a sensor device, like I think dates back from the U.S. military to the time of the Vietnam War, where they put this wire cable in the ground, and it is so sensitive that if you walk or stop the ground 100 yards from it, it picks it up. And we were putting that down, and there was just something about the atmosphere that night, and with those or what appeared to be foot marks in the grass, that was fascinating, and Victoria was actually getting rather nervous. She I don't know how many times she said, "Let's get the hell out of here. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's get the hell out of here." I said, "No, relax. We'll put them out." So Todd and I were deploying the sensors and the cameras. It's heading back. Todd told me, almost back at the Zodiac at the beach, Todd told me, stomp the ground. I did, and sure enough, the sensors picked it up, and we had the receiving end. It was a walkie-talkie, and anytime something would activate that sensor, we could even hear it on the boat. Then we knew something was there. And that whole night went by, and I swear to God, that sensor never went off once. At least I never heard it go off. And the next morning, we retrieved it and went to another location. But I would have loved to have spent 2 or 3 days in that area, just like I would have loved to have spent 2 or 3 days in the area where the salmon run was going, where we had the run-in with the grizzly bear.
Yeah. That was scary. So, we have to tell the grizzly story, because it was that was probably the most adventurous part of, at least for me. I mean, so the one evening we anchored in where there was the mouth of a river, because we wanted to go look for tracks, and we were going to go up this river and look. Thomas said there was a history there, and so I know. Yeah, and
the night before, Todd had asked him. He wanted to know, was there anywhere where the salmon were still running, and Seaward remembered this river, and it was a salmon run stream, and he said, if there's any chance of something coming down to feed on salmon, that's probably where we'd find it. And when we went ashore, there was it was high tide, and there was sort of like a large boulder outcropping going out into the water, and it was really the only place we could put the Zodiac in. And on the landing party, it was myself, Todd, you, and who else was it? Was that Darren that went with us on that?
Yeah, Darren went. I actually came over separately. Yeah, there was you and Darren and Todd, and then I came over on a separate. Right, there was in a separate boat. 4 of us on there. Todd had Tom Stewart's shotgun. And we were going to, and we hadn't gone ashore. It was a beautiful beach area there of wet, muddy sand where everything that went through left good footprints. I only gone a few steps, and I found wolf prints. And I pointed that out to Todd. And later on, when we started walking towards where the river was, there was beautiful sets of grizzly tracks all over the place, so we knew there were bears around. And we got down to where there was this fork where the river had gone in, and there was this almost like a tunnel through this dead tree out of the bush for some kind. And we thought that would be a good place to put up the trip cameras, and that's what we ended up doing. And while we were doing that, as I recall the scenario here, a message came on the radio, Captain William, his usual nonchalant way. How you all doing? Yeah, fine. Who's got the shotgun? I said, well, I think Todd's got the gun, and Todd said, yeah, I got it. You might want to load it.
Oh, my.
Oh. Why? I think it was, well, you know that black bear we told you about earlier? It's actually a grizzly, and it's coming your way.
Oh, wow.
And it was just on the other side of this rocky outcropping where we had landed. So it was basically closer to where we had to go to get picked up than we were. And that rocky outcropping was high enough that we couldn't see the bear. So was it 2 from the outcropping? Was it 10 feet from there? Where the hell was it? So, and that's when Seaward, or not Seaward, but Todd Neese tried to load the shotgun, because he thought it was loaded to begin with, and it turned out them extra shells were the main shells. They were so rust-covered and everything, he had trouble getting them in the breech. I think he was getting a little P.O. because I could hear him cursing. Trying to load the stuff. As a matter of fact, I think you were with me, and we were setting up the cameras.
Yeah, we continue to
carry on doing our job anyway, even though the bear's coming. We're going to set the cameras anyway. So I was tying the camera up above the tunnel and stuff like that, and we were looking at Todd, and we noticed Todd's wrestling with a shotgun, and he's kind of pointing in that direction when he's doing it. And I yelled, I said, Todd! He goes, what? He goes, what? I said, point it that way. I go, oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, and I was looking at the direction that the report there was a grizzly on one side of this rock.
Not us. Yeah, so we get it down there, and we're all doing it. And we decided, well, we were kind of debating, well, should we try and cross the river to get some more distance between us and the bear, or what should we do? And we could see seaward in the Zodiac. He was kind of like, apparently he was yelling at the bear, or cursing the bear or something. Oh, yeah. You're trying to pee off the bear. Okay. What he's trying to do is try to get it to go away in his clocky walk language or something like that. So we all decided, let's just, boys, I remember saying to the group, boys, bears around here in British Columbia are as common as rabbits. Don't let it worry you. Let's just head right back to where the jetty is, and we'll make noise. The bear acts normally. It should hopefully go away. And I did notice you tried to keep us between you and the bear.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I did know.
I think someone had a little foghorn or something, was blowing it off. And,
yeah, I did.
For some reason, I just started singing the Bare Necessities from the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
The bare necessities. Those bears. And we're just walking right back towards the bear, and I guess the bear.
Man.
I guess the bear eventually.
We never
did
see him.
Kind of weird. This is kind of weird. These people are nuts.
It was funny.
We ended up back in the boat, and early the next morning, I volunteered to go in and get them because I knew where the cameras and the sensors were because I put them up. But Ron Moorhead didn't get a chance to go in with the shore party the night before, so he wanted to go, and apparently he went in and he got almost up to his crotch in the mud, and they had to pull him out. Yeah. But when we were
if you went too close to the
cameras,
to the water, if you went too close to the water, it was very, very soft, and Ron got in and was sunk into the mud. So Thomas Seawood went in and tried to pull him out, and he had to take his boots off to get out. And Ron was able to get out eventually. Everybody got back safe. But the night when we were there, it's funny because you always joke when you go out with somebody if you're attacked by an animal, you don't have to be the fastest, you have to be fastest, run faster than your buddy. And at one point I noted, now it's not really a matter of who can run the fastest, who can swim the fastest. So, because we were closer to the water, and at the whole time I'm like looking back towards the direction of the river because we had there was plenty of footprints, of bears and stuff, paw prints, not footprints, coming up and down that river. So, but
huge.
That also,
were big bears.
Huge. Yeah. So we never did see the one that was on the beach with us, and that did cancel because we were going to have dinner on the beach, and that's why Ron was one of the people that helped cook. He used to own restaurants, so he stayed on the boat, and where they were getting stuff ready we were going to have this dinner on the beach. And after that, we decided we'd probably just eat on the boat, and I was fine with that.
Yeah. There were bear prints all over the place. There were obviously a lot, and there were obviously grizzly prints. There were a lot of grizzlies. These are matter of fact, when we were pulling away the next day after everything was recovered and everything, there was a huge grizzly river where we were, and he was twice the size apparently as the one that was that we saw the night before. But the interesting thing was, it was only like about an hour from the time we got back on the Zodiac back to the main ship, and dark. Mm-hmm. And in that time, our trip cameras, we got film footage of the wolf. It was probably making the tracks that I found, but we got a beautiful picture of a large grizzly, And then I pointed out to, and funny, it seemed the camera was being hit, and I said, hey, the bear in the picture is not the one hitting the camera, another one is. And I guess it was a mother and a cub. And the cub was chewing on well, it tore the camera off the tree, apparently, and it just destroyed the strap that was holding it to the tree, because I wrapped that thing around that narrow tree branch about 10 times to secure the camera on it, and bear got it off in no time. I think what it was it's the batteries, because bears apparently love the salty taste of the batteries, so they like them like salt licks. They can smell it and they go after it. So that could be an explanation why it was so interested in the camera. Yeah, and that was obviously that was a wildlife trail that came out underneath those dead trees and things like that there, and it was obviously used. That's why we chose to put the trip cameras there, and the sensor not too far away up on the trail, and we were right. Unfortunately, it was grizzly bears, not Sasquatch.
Yeah, it's funny,
I believe I saw that footage.
Later, it wasn't lost on me that you and I were standing up there by this animal trail where a bear was on the beach on the other side.
Right.
It didn't say that his buddies weren't just inside the woods, thinking that we looked like tasty treats, but everybody got out, and it was.
We could have just been a nice evening dinner for a family of grizzly bears. I mean, we had a shotgun where the shells were so rusted. Todd realized he probably got one shot and one shot only. And who knows if when that finally left the beach and went into the trees, for all we know, it could have been on that trail going through the trees, coming out right where those cameras were.
Right.
You just don't know. It was probably watching us the whole darn time, or a number of other bears. I mean, there were bears all over the place. I mean, it would have been a silly idea to cook burgers on the beach that night. It really would have.
Yeah. Oh, man. That would not have been good.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys planning on doing this again?
I know Todd's anxious to do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. It was a expedition. It was a worthwhile expedition. I don't think with the boat, I don't think we could add too many numbers to the size of the team, because I mean we're kind of living on top of each other anyway. It was so crowded in there. But yeah, I mean it'd be awesome. I'd pick a new name though.
Yeah.
How about
I'd like to see you guys
2?
Yeah, I'd like to see you guys do that and spend, like Thomas said, maybe spend a week to 5 days at each one of those spots over a course of time.
That'd be cool. I mean, if we had the same amount of time to do it again, let's say we had the same boat, the same crew, and the same amount of days, what to do different? I'd say go straight to that island where we spent the second night and spend half our time there, and spend the second half time by that salmon feeder stream again, and spend all our time there.
Yeah.
And all the other places we visit, save them for another expedition. But spend a significant amount of time at the 2 areas where we knew we were encountering wildlife, and the conditions were there for wildlife: a food source, a water source. And, of course, we have a long history of sightings. I mean, I'm not saying there was probably Sasquatch in and around where all those grizzlies were, but the area around there, of all the beaches we visited, that was the best place to find tracks. I would have loved the opportunity to go up that river a little ways to see if we could find any other type of track or footprint other than grizzly tracks.
Right. And that was our initial premise was to go up the river, but I think the grizzly waylaid that idea.
Yeah. And we were running out of time. I can imagine. Yeah, that was our last stop. We were running out of time, so yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea this was actually a kind of a scouting mission, if you would. The idea was to go look at these different areas that had and I always thought that I think was was under the impression that it would be one of a series of expeditions into the area. I know that Todd's. I mean, one of the things that was cool about it was that Todd Neese lives on a boat. It isn't a big yacht, as some people put out there when he was doing fundraising for Operation Sea Monkey.
Right.
He owns a yacht, and he wants to raise money. It was funny because there were naysayers, of people then, and there were people that were really supportive of the idea, both raw support, and some people that contributed a considerable amount of money to help fund the expedition. And that to me was one of the cool things about it, was that there was a lot of support for from the Bigfoot community. There were some people that poo-pooed it and were negative about it, but to me that was kind of just sour grapes. The idea was to go and into an area, and I always talk about, we're looking for a moving needle in a haystack, and here was an area that has a history. We're going with somebody that knows the area and has had personal encounters in this area, and sure, and we were going at the time of year when there was a higher number of encounters in the area than other times of the year because of the food sources. So, but I know that Todd intends to move up that way, or at least travel up that way after his retirement, which he's looking, a few more years. He's going to retire, and me and Diane are going to take their boat up there and hopefully research of that area heavily. So,
Diane, I know she was very disappointed she wasn't able to go on Operation Sea Monkey. She really wanted on that. I think, Julie, you would have loved it too.
Oh yeah.
It was great. It was fascinating. I mean, just standing out that boat in the silence at night, scanning the shorelines with those thermal devices, you just go, come on, something walk out onto the beach. Come on, something happened. Come on.
And that was part of the project.
Whales,
was that
whales going by us all the time, dolphins. It was just uncanny. You'd hear these pieces, and you think, Jesus, that sounded like it came out off the shore. And suddenly you realize there's a great big whale going past.
Wow, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the remoteness of it. I mean, the whole idea of these islands, it's like some of them are the size of towns, some of them are only a few hundred yards across, right? And there's hundreds of them on the north end between the mainland and Vancouver Island. So the idea of Sasquatch getting from the mainland to Vancouver Island, I mean, they could cross the switch. I mean, there were areas where the islands were so dense and thick, a person could swim from island to island to island.
There are places where that's the case.
Yeah. And these areas have never been, other than First Nations a long time ago, there really aren't that many people there. The only time there are people around is when a logging operation comes in, or the military is doing an exercise in the area or something like that. But it's wilderness. I mean, those islands, we encountered wolves, so that wolves had to get there somehow. So that means wolves swim. Grizzlies. They still debate whether there had been on Vancouver Island, but there has to be because they're on the island and they're on the mainland. So, and they're everywhere in between. So there's proof there that grizzlies do cross on the islands. They do swim
on this, and that there was a story when we were up there of a cougar swimming, being in one of the mainlands and it had come from one of the islands. So, and that was a big deal when we were up there. It had been walking around town.
Every time a big seal or sea lion popped its head up, I always took a good long look at it to make sure it was a seal or a sea lion, because I've heard stories of Sasquatch swimming between the islands or in lakes and stuff, and basically the only thing they expose above the waves is their head when they do so. I've heard stories like that going back years. And there's no reason to assuming that Sasquatch does exist. They're getting from island to island between Vancouver Island and the mainland the same way everything else is. No reason to They don't. Yeah. And Tom Steenburg, he seemed to think that time of year when the salmon runs are going and the berries are ripe and stuff, that seemed to be when the most encounters between these people and the Sasquatch seemed to occur. So we were there at the right time and the right time of year to encounter something. We just didn't.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's just like any other.
You just never knew it.
That's just like anywhere else. You go out. I mean, in the best. That defines Bigfoot research. You go out into an area that has a history, and hope for the best, and do the best that you can. Like you say, when we were talking about earlier, is that you're not going to find the one way definitely not to find Bigfoot is sitting on Facebook in your mom's basement.
Right.
So I mean, you got to be out in the woods looking for
when they were cut down operations.
Go ahead.
That's what most of the critics were doing while they were criticizing Operation Sea Monkey.
Right.
Right. They were, probably the guys who do nothing but, have nothing better to do but go from site to site, like the Bigfoot forums or something like that. And, let's nasty comment here or nasty comment there. I mean, you're never going to get rid of that. Never let that bother us. It's never bothered me. Certainly not going to let it bother anybody on such an expedition. I say go for it. Go for it. Go out there, search, look, and if you find something, great.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting concept, and I also, Gunnar, when you had mentioned, Todd had said the first of several, and that's why I mentioned maybe in the future, since you guys went and scouted out that area, divide the time up amongst each place, a couple days here, a couple days there. I know, there's money involved, and it's going to take money to do these things, but I think it was definitely a good start of something that could be long-term and potentially have something of value to come out of that.
Well, it was a worthwhile trip. That's all I can say. It cost me a little bit because I lost one of my jobs here because I went on it. I told them I was going. I gave them plenty of notice. They won't say if that's the reason why, but that's the reason why I know. Well, worthwhile though. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great expedition. I'd love to do it again. But like I said, the only thing I'd do different would be to spend more time at certain areas and not so much small time at a whole bunch of different areas.
I agree with that idea, too.
Yeah, this was a recce, or as you Americans call it, a recon. And, well, we found the areas where we should look.
Wow.
And if we ever go back, I think we should spend more time. More time.
Well, I think
make sure we got a shotgun where the shells ain't rusted.
Oh my. Well, Thomas, I think the whole thing though is the next time you're invited to go on that expedition, you should have on one condition, and that's if I can go with.
I'll make that.
There you go.
Really, for you, I will make that my one demand.
Awesome. Todd, did you hear that?
All right.
Oh, my. Well, now listen, I do have
I just got
question.
bumped off the trip. The next Operation Sea Monkey, I think.
I know, Gunnar. I'm sorry. Love you, but I tell you. What was the other question that I had from the chat room? Let me see. Let me go back here. I know there was another question. Oh, yeah. Do you have any investigators or anybody up there around you, Thomas, that you know of that is currently investigating that we may be hearing more from? I mean, like any, newbies or anybody out there in your area that's getting hooked in on this?
I have a great batch of colleagues I keep close around here. I've already mentioned one tonight named Bill Miller. He's an American fellow from Illinois. He's back in Illinois right now. He usually goes home in the wintertime. He's usually up here, and he runs a small business called Sasquatch Country Adventures up here in the Harrison Lake area. And he's been doing research with me now for about 8 years. He comes up in the summer, and we spend a lot of time on the Polaris Rangers. I don't think there's a Forest Service road anywhere in this area that we haven't been on half a dozen times. I've got another group of people up here, dedicated researchers that have a very skeptical attitude towards the subjects as a whole, but not closed-mindedness, which is a key thing. I've mentioned a few names: Bill Reed, his wife Pauline, Jason Kane, who's an ex-police officer and U.S. Marine. He lives up here, and he has a website called SasquatchCanada.ca. Brad Trent, who's a woodsman, he's in his 70s now, and he's been a woodsman and a hunter his whole life. Had a couple interesting encounters himself in the early 80s. Well, he had one, and one of his sons had one, and that's what got the bug going with him. He's pretty knowledgeable of the local area around here. We get together and go out every now and then. Like most of those videos you see on YouTube on my channel that feature me talking about were taken by this group of people. And we go out and I take them with me, and we go out and we investigate things. And I get a report. I'll call up some of them and see if they can come along, because it's always good to have more people there. I spent a lot of years going out all by myself and realized if something happened to me, no one would ever know I was gone. So maybe it's a good idea to actually have somebody with you every now and then. There's a number of people who do research in this area who are good researchers. They are not suffering from Ivan Mark syndrome. There's a number of people in this area who are big sufferers of Ivan Mark syndrome, and they don't talk to me anymore because they know up with it. Yeah.
It's amazing how quick they want to shut people down who are, skeptical, but in a good way. And once they realize that, you're not going to pat them on the back and say, hey, great job on that picture of a blurry tree stump, then they get really mad at you, and then they start the personal insults and the name calling, and it's just ridiculous.
Oh, well, we got
people don't want to go over their evidence with you, then don't show it. You know what I mean? Don't drag it out on Facebook and stick it out there and go, look at the Sasquatch, and then when you're like, looks pretty much like a tree stump to me, then they start attacking you, and it's just... Oh, yeah, well, that's the thing.
And I got people up here who have intentionally hoaxed photographs, and I've exposed it. They see things, Sasquatch with hats, bird nest hats on all the time. And one guy who says, the reason I don't see a Sasquatch all the time is because I'm not looking with my third eye.
Oh, my. That's a good one.
I said, your third eye needs glasses, son, because you're seeing stuff that ain't there.
Yeah.
But and we get all kinds of people like that. I mean, the asylum being run by the inmates has not hit here to the same extent as it has in the United States, but it's here.
It's a hot mess.
It's everywhere now. I mean, when I started in this, I used to say, God, at least we're not as bad as the UFO field, but we are now. And even worse. And it's the tabloid mentality of the press that's just flocked to this thing, because it's the people with the ridiculous stories like this that get all the attention, which is fine by them because, let's face it, that's what they're really after in the first place.
Right. So
we care if Sasquatch exists or not. They're just out to be they want to be seen in the world as a real life Mulder and Scully.
Wow.
I mean, we've kind of covered that there are problems in the the Bigfoot field. What do you think is going on right now that is right?
That's right.
I mean, are we on the right track? Yeah.
Well, we're spinning our wheels. I mean, Renee said once, everyone's making the same mistakes, doing the same things over and over again. They just got prettier equipment when they do it. You know, really. But then again, that's what you have to do because if you are trying to solve a mystery and find an answer to a question, there's really only two ways to go about it. One, you investigate sighting reports that you think may be legitimate, and you try to get to the bottom of things, and you try to find evidence of the creature itself. That means going out there and spending long hours of seeing absolutely nothing. And occasionally, if you're lucky, once or twice, you come across something that's interesting. Unless you're the one guy that's going to have one walk out in front of your 30-06 rifle one day, and you end the mystery then and there. You know?
Right.
That's the only thing that will happen, or you come across the remains of one that died by other ways. I mean, let's face it, the death of a Sasquatch, a body or a piece of the body, is what's going to end the mystery. Nothing else will ever do.
Nope.
Nothing else will ever do. I don't think DNA or samples from a dart or anything would do it because DNA, there's no Sasquatch to compare it to, so the best they can tell is unknown primate.
It drives me crazy when people refer to those DNA studies that were done by a certain doctor, and they're like, well, they proved that Sasquatch exists with that DNA. And I'm like, really? Now, what specimen did they take it from exactly? Well, they just know it's a DNA of a Bigfoot. It drives me nuts because, no, it's not scientific. You have to have a known specimen that you know that sample came from to test. You don't just find a blob of something out in the middle of the woods, you know, a hair, for example. Okay, the best you're going to get is it's an unknown primate or it's an unknown something. That's one of my pet peeves about all this.
Well, the thing is, it comes out. All you have to do is ask someone that's the Smithsonian, the National Geographic Society, or any major museum, anthropology, and anything. What do you need to confirm that the Sasquatch is real and it exists and it's a species living in the Pacific Northwest United States and Canada? They're unanimous. They need a body or piece of the body. Nothing else will do. And no amount of wishful, political correct thinking is ever going to change that, because that's the way it works. When they say they need a body or a piece of body, that's exactly what they mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not going to change their minds on that. I mean, a great still video or a great still photo will make people ask a lot of questions, and it'll change a few minds, but in general, accepting it and being declared and taking it out of the realm of mythology and putting it in the realm of everyday zoology, it won't do it.
No,
right.
I agree with you that it's going to have to be a body. The only other possibility would be a long-term, study where somebody went in and had a group of Sasquatches where they got clear photographic evidence repeatedly and multiple samples of DNA. And I mean, you're going to have a lot of corroborative evidence. It's going to be a Jane Goodall kind of study where you don't. It's not fuzzy pictures. A single fuzzy picture on Facebook is certainly not going to do it. You're going to have. I mean, it would have to be some.
Yeah.
Remember, Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall weren't trying to prove the existence of chimpanzees and gorillas. That was already established, and it was established by someone going out and bringing in a body.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They already knew they were there.
Well, right, exactly.
Right.
And
now, no one is going to do anything like that for the Sasquatch until someone proves that the Sasquatch is actually there.
Right.
Right. That's the only one of anyone ever going to finance someone like a Jane Goodall or Diane Fossey or a Thomas Steenburg or a Gunnar Monson. Yeah. Expedition to go out there and sit there 24/7 without proof that they're already there to begin with.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what happened with chimpanzees, someone brought in bodies. How did they bring in bodies? They shot them. Same thing with gorillas.
Right.
They went out there and they shot them. It was simple as that. They brought in one they found dead. I don't know, but the point is the body was brought in. So their existence was always established long before Jane Goodall, long before Diane Fossey. But people love those lady stories because it's so nice and Greenpeace-like and politically correct and, ooh, isn't that nice? But, well, true. And they did a great job, and they did a lot to understand our understanding of their behavior, but they did not prove their existence. It had already been established.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that was cool before we went out there is that somebody had put up some really spectacular night vision thermal images of chimpanzees. Yeah, but if we had come back with something like that, it would be very compelling and lead. First of all, we did not have the level of equipment that they used for the documentary that they showed, and it's still a needle in a haystack kind of deal. You go into some place that you think your best chance of encountering a Sasquatch is, and then hope they show up and want to interact with you enough to expose themselves. We've had some stuff happen in our research area, where we've seen things through thermal images that we can't explain. Shane and Cindy Cadell were up in our research area in the last year sometime and had something they couldn't agree at the time what it was, whether, is that a raccoon up in the tree, because it looked like it was peeking behind a tree, and looking at the area in the daylight, it was weird. So that something, with a roundish shaped head it looked like had been peeking behind this tree, and they watched it. They never recorded it, but and they didn't see anything. Again, a single incident like that, even if you recorded it, unless you had the highest end equipment that could show facial features and still, you're going to argue with people that, like Thomas was saying earlier, is that you bring a Bigfoot body in, you're still going to have people, naysayers, people that are not going to buy that Bigfoot is real because it doesn't fit into the belief system.
Right.
Until they're, like I said, it's a body alive or dead, or it's a long-term study with multiple pieces of evidence, DNA. You can take hair, and you can get fingernails, and you can take clear pictures or video. Which, that's really, it hasn't happened to date. It's unlikely that that's the way it's going to happen. The much more likely scenario is a body deceased. Probably is the easiest way. I'm not, and I'm not going to hardly be the one to go out and shoot one. So, but it'd be a happenstance thing to go out and find a body, which is again a smaller needle in a much larger haystack.
It would not surprise me at all if the day comes and the skeletal remains of a Sasquatch are laid out there on the table for the world to see. It's not going to be found by some researcher like myself who brought it in from the bush somewhere. It's going to be laid out by some anthropology student who stumbled in some dust-covered box or long-forgotten drawer in a museum basement somewhere. We're not surprised me one bit, because they have so much, and there's so many stories of the past, the strange bones being, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if some anthropology student going, oh, what's this? Blows the dust off. Oh, let's see, this was turned in 1963. What the heck is, Jesus, is a big skull. It wouldn't surprise one little bit if that's how it comes to an end. It may be a good idea to start try to get permission and start looking, and if you can get permission to look in museum archives, things like that. Let's see your dead.
There's been rumors for years about the Smithsonian having all these bones and stuff, in their basement, and it's a big cover-up and all this, but
I don't buy the cover-up part, but there's no doubt in my mind they have large
think they have stuff they don't even know about.
Yeah, I don't buy the conspiracy part, but they have. There's no doubt they have bones and things like that have been turned in that they have just been forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
everything they have on display, they've got 10 other items that they've never put on display. And archives.
Well, they have such a huge backlog, right, of stuff that they haven't gotten to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
And even forgotten where they came from. So much time has gone.
Right.
You know,
and stuff that was turned in before DNA was even known. Those kind of things.
No one gave it much of a thought, or they
didn't exist.
Bone or whatever. Yeah, they had no idea what they were looking at. So that's I wouldn't be surprised if it ever came to an end. It would come to an end that way. Yeah.
That or a log truck driver hits one, and then and the body is collected by
right then and there. And that's one of the biggest points, and one of the major points the skeptics have is we have a lot of animals that are rarely seen. Mountain lions and wolverines. I still have not seen a wolverine in the wild, but all of them have been killed on our highways.
Right.
Yeah, all of them have. I've heard of stories of Sasquatch being hit by vehicles, but never killed. Or if they have been killed, for some reason the body was not collected. They said, well, maybe they're too smart to get hit by vehicles. I said, well, people get hit every damn day, so that's saying a lot.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of stories of road crossings. You think eventually one would not be quite sufficiently fast to make it across, but an encounter. It seems, I don't know what it is about wild, but sometimes they seem stunned by approaching car lights, and they wait till the last moment to dash out across. I mean, I see rabbits doing that all the time here, and I've had so many close calls with deer and everything else, coyotes, things like that crossing the highways here. And I've heard so many stories of people seeing Sasquatch in a similar manner. It's either standing on the side of the road watching you go by, or it crosses in front of you. It's just unbelievable for a few minutes. And someday, you figure someone's going to hit one. But so far, it hasn't happened. A few stories I've heard where they have been hit, they have not been killed. So, right. There's a story from out several years ago from the other side of Portland on a very busy highway that has an intersection, Highway 84, that is runs east out of Portland all the way to Idaho. December 6, 1975. Yep. See, that was a good guess. That's a famous story, but there are lots of road crossing stories, but not and much fewer, of course, where someone claimed to have hit one. And then you've got like Jacko, that whatever happened to that creature, whatever it ended up being. Thomas, we got a few minutes left. Where do you see the future of this subject going? And short, I mean, you other than an accidental roadkill, is how do you see this coming to a conclusion? Well, if there is a Sasquatch out there, and a species does exist, the only way it will ever conclude is like when someone brings in a body or a piece of a body. If there is no Sasquatch, and there never was, it will just go on as it always has. People saying they see the things, and people trying to follow up on it, and the mystery continues. Unfortunately, what I see in the future is rather bleak, because like I said, the asylum is getting bigger and the inmates are getting more populated. They are the majority now. They were a minority when I started, but now they are the majority. I mean, I don't mean to be downhearted when I say that, but that's just the fact, because the media has a tabloid mentality,
and people do strange things for when involving publicity, and people like telling crazy monster stories for some reason and being the center of attention. Yeah, I saw Bigfoot. He picked up my pickup and threw it in the river. Could you tell finding Bigfoot about it? I like to be on the show. I cannot know that all the time. And that is unfortunate reality of it as it exists today.
I was not aware that Forrest Gump had seen Bigfoot.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of that now, and it's become trendy, especially in the U.S., to say you saw Bigfoot, and that has caused nothing but problems. I mean, back in the 70s and the 80s, most people were afraid to tell that they saw something. You had to get it out of them, right?
Right.
Or they told you the story under complete confidentiality. Do not reveal my name. Do not do this. Do not do that. Please, I don't want anyone knowing this happened to me. I still get that. But I also get calls from people who are saying, hey, do you know those people finding Bigfoot? I'd like to be on the show. They tell this amazing cock and bull story. I say, I'll pass it on. Click.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had a lot of people call me about stuff like that, and they're coming out of the woodwork saying, because of all these stories, like I said, stories that have taken on a life of their own they never should have, like tree banging and rock clanking and things like that. People, every time they hear a tree branch break, they think a Sasquatch is nearby now.
Right.
Every shapeless hole in the ground's a footprint. It's just gone to the point of absolute madness. I mean, back when I started, we knew who the lunatics were. There was only a few of them, and we had one who was the king, John Eric Beckjord.
I remember that name.
Yeah. He was remembered on the Bigfoot forum page as the man who could not be named.
Yes.
He would phone me up at 3 o'clock in the morning pretending to be some professor at a university. He was that nuts, but he knew who they were, and we took it with the greatest salt. Unfortunately, now they're everywhere. You got people suffering from Ivan Marks syndrome. They just like being the center of attention. That's the Todd Standing types and the old Paul Freeman types, right? And you got people who are serious researchers and do good work, but nobody ever hears about them because their research is not sexy enough for the tabloid mentality of the media. Yeah.
Right.
I'm only known in the field. I like to think I'm known, and I know I'm known, and I'm respected in this field. But it took years to do that. There are people who are unwilling to wait that long. They want to be recognized right now.
Yeah.
And so they'll do what they have to do to get recognized right now. And it works for them until they get caught, and that's the problem. If you're getting into this kind of research, do it because you're fascinated by the mystery and you want to find an answer. Don't do it because you think you're going to become rich or famous. Because odds are you're not going to get rich. I can guarantee you that. And famous, it might not be the kind of fame you want.
More likely to be infamous than famous. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you gotta be like me. You have to grow up a weird kid who all their friends were out collecting hockey sticks and thinking about being the next Guy Lafleur, or I guess in America there's a baseball player, but hearing a hockey player and spending their lives in that and the heroes. No, me, I was reading books about John Green and Big Apes. People were telling them about in the forest of British Columbia. That was me. Yeah. I still remember the day. I still remember hearing my father tell my mother, "Don't worry, he'll grow out of it." It didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
Not so much.
Yeah, and I was in this and doing this for years. I knew all the big guys in it, but You know, I don't think anyone started recognizing me until I actually started publishing books on it. So,
right, and those books are available at Amazon.
Yeah, I stick to the facts and I never deviate from the facts. That's my favorite saying. If you want to know a Thomas Steenburg cliche, that's the big one. Stick to the facts, never deviate from the facts. And if you want to get into this field of research, that's the attitude you have to have. And there are a lot of good people in this who have that attitude, but they are the minority. I mean, your guest last week, Stephen Stufert, I call him Angel Eyes.
Right.
In California. He's one. You know, the guys I know here, he's one. Bill Miller, you know, he's one. Julie, you. Are you? But we're the minority.
Right.
Minority.
You're right, and
not the ones the National Enquirer are going to be writing about.
Yeah.
It'll be the Carter Coy farms.
Yeah.
She has Bigfoot visiting her 5 times a week. She gives them garlic.
Right. Or I have Bigfoot the baby.
She take a picture of the stone it threw. And thus,
well, Thomas, we are just about out of time, and I want to thank you for joining us on Monster X today. I also would like to thank my guest co-host and major Thomas Steenburg fan, Julie Rench, for joining us. And we will hope to have you back on the show in the future. Absolutely. And I look forward to possibly going out on Operation Sea Monkey 2, named something else, with you, Thomas. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Monster X Radio.
Thanks,
we will be back next Sunday with our friend Cindy Cadell will be joining us. Have a great week. Until then, keep it squatchy.
You know what's great? Going to a game. You know what's not great? Parking at a game. With Uber, you can turn event parking into a non-event. Just install the Uber app. Enter your destination, confirm your location, and within minutes, a car will pick you up. I know, right? With upfront fares, you can know the price before you go. And you pay with the Uber app so you can save your cash for the souvenir shop. So make tonight a fun night. Install the Uber app now and take your first ride today. Uber, the better way to get there.